Welcome to the Kids First Co-Parenting Podcast, the podcast for smart, intentional, millennial moms raising resilient kids after separation and divorce. I'm Dr. Carolyn Royster, a child psychologist, coach, and a mom. After thousands of therapy hours with kids caught in the middle of high-conflict households, I'm here to help moms like you do it differently. From peaceful co-parenting to total chaos, I've got you. Here we talk boundaries, regulation, and how to raise a great kid, even if your ex is beyond difficult. We blend science with real life, and as always, keep the focus where it matters, on raising great kids. This is Kids First Co-Parenting. Welcome to another episode of the Kids First Co-Parenting Podcast. I am so happy you're here. If you've ever gone blank or gotten really defensive or just frozen or said yes when you meant to say no after receiving a notification on your app or a text, there might be a reason for that. Today in this episode, you're going to learn about the 4 F's, which is a pretty well-known psychological phenomenon, and I'll explain to you how it relates to high conflict co-parenting because it is a trauma response, my friend. And you'll see how it shows up in co-parenting conflict dynamics and around communication in particular. And I'm going to help you understand why the first step is understanding what this is before you can work with it and know how to respond. Okay? Before we dive in, I just want to give you a little update on life is really good here. It's been a very busy end of summer. Just returned from an all-inclusive in Mexico with my family, and it was fantastic. Highly recommend kids stay free resorts. I had a wonderful time. It was very relaxing, even though I had kids running around swimming and doing the pools and the beaches and all of those things. And so I've kind of re-entered into work after taking that very much needed space, and I'm feeling really grateful for it. So that's just a little update on how things are with me. Well, let's dive in, okay? So, the goal when we're communicating with your co-parent is to try to stay really calm. That's the whole point, right? You want to stay calm, and the reason we want to stay calm is so that you don't respond out of a place of anger, which is more likely for you to feel, not happy with how you respond, or to say something you don't mean, or to say something out of anger, or to be reactive. Now, if you are co-parenting with someone who's really narcissistic or trying really hard to get control or power over you, or is playing a game that hopefully you're not playing, the game of I just want to win instead of doing what's right for kids, then responding when you are activated is a terrible idea. And most moms know that. So most people know I really should calm down, or I really need to take a minute before I respond. However, when you're flooded or when you're having a really hard time with something because it's triggering or it's insulting or it's irritating or whatever it might be, sometimes we want that feeling to go away as quickly as possible. And as a result of that, you may send a response or send a message or a text that you later regret, because you were activated and you were having a hard time. And so instead of letting yourself regulate and calm down, you said something that you wish you hadn't, or that was just plain reactive. Had you thought more about it, you maybe wouldn't have said it. Along the journey of us figuring out how to help you respond with integrity and to truly respond in a way that puts your kids first and protects your own mental health, I need you to understand and know what's happening first. That is the meat of what we are going to talk about today. Again, as always, this is not ever meant to make you feel bad. Information is power, and I want you to have this information because these are well-known psychological concepts that we can use. We have the information, we use them, we know how and why they're activating you, then you can work a little bit quicker on managing your response. But it's hard to fix a problem that you don't understand, as we always talk about here. Okay, so let's dive in. There are a couple of very common responses that folks will have when they're in a stressful situation or a traumatic, life-threatening, anxiety-producing situation, okay? This is neurobiological. This is the way we were made. This is how we were designed as human being as animals, as evolutionary creatures, however you want to explain it. Okay. What I'm going to talk about, these styles of responding, they're not actually unique to you. And in fact, a lot of times when I teach moms about this, they start thinking about how they are also seeing this kind of response in their kids. Okay. That's kind of the cool thing about learning about ourselves is when we learn about ourselves, we also get the chance to learn about raising little people into adults. There tends to be kind of an evolutionary response to stress. And when I say kind of, I mean there is. So I want you to picture yourself way back in olden times, right? Perhaps you've come across this great land of ours in a covered wagon and you're sitting by a campfire on the edges of the Rocky Mountains, beautiful woods all around you. Night has fallen, right? You just finished cooking your elk, caribou over the fire. Life is good. And you hear a twig snap in the woods. Evolutionarily or biologically, your body is going to respond to that sound a couple of different ways. We call them the 4 F's. The first response would be freeze, okay? And so you may freeze when you hear the sound of that twig snapping because your brain subconsciously and very quickly is starting to think, oh my gosh, is there a bear in the woods? I better freeze so it doesn't see me and come eat me. This is how primal these instincts are. So freeze is the first one. It's where you kind of get stuck. And sometimes people will even talk about feeling their body freeze, get very immobile, like they can't move. They want to move, but they can't. That is the freeze response. Another response you could have would be to fight. So you may pick up a rock or, I don't know, history's not really my thing, guys, but your shotgun, if those were around at the time of covered wagons. I'm not sure. Maybe because you ate an elk. So I guess you could have had a bow and arrow. Anyways, this is a whole side. You pick up your weapon, whatever you use to kill the elk that you're eating. So morbid. I'm not really a fan of, anyways, whatever. You pick up your weapon, right? And you get ready. All of the stress hormones and adrenaline in your body is preparing your body to fight. You suddenly feel really strong and you get that weapon ready and you're like, whatever comes through those woods and into this campsite, I'm going to fight it. That's a fight response. You may also have a similar adrenaline response that triggers you to flee. Okay, so that's the third F. We have done freeze, fight, and flee. Flee is you're running. You hear that twig snap and you're like, I got to book it out of here. We're getting gone. We got to run. We got to get away from this bear as fast as we possibly can. That is how we're going to stay safe. And then there's something called the fawn response. So this would be, again, with the bear metaphor, the twig snapping is a bear. It comes into the sight and you get your eyes really wide and you get down low and you make your cute little, like, I'm a cute little baby, don't hurt me, kind of a cuteness response or a fawning response that then helps you seem less appealing to a predator. That's called the fawn. So the 4 major responses are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Right? These responses that are very normal for human behavior have come out of an evolutionary tactic to keep oneself safe in a life-threatening situation. Today, what we're talking about is how do these responses show up and how does this apply to co-parenting? You need to really understand them first before I go into how it applies to what we're talking about today. Many of you have left traumatic, conflictual, difficult dynamics. In some cases, you have been physically hurt. In some cases, there have been traumatic events, let's just say, that have occurred with your co-parent. In other cases, it's more of a slow build, as in over time, we've gotten to a place where you are stressed out and having a stress response, if not a full-on traumatic response, to interacting with this person. And so how do these things show up when you're co-parenting with a difficult ex? Whether or not you've had an actual traumatic experience with this person, which unfortunately a lot of the moms that I work with have. Right. And so I'm not minimizing that, but I'm also saying sometimes when you've had a long history of getting triggered by someone, we will start to see these patterns show up. How does this concept of the 4 F's show up in co-parenting? In particular, really conflictual co-parenting. Let's take fight. Fight's probably the easiest one to understand. So you get that message, you get that alert on your app, and your response would be something like, I'm going to fire back. I'm going to escalate this. I'm going to really get into trying to prove my point. It gets really, really heated really fast. You're like, those are fighting words, and I'm fighting back, buddy boy. A lot of times this comes from a place of, you're not going to push me around anymore. Like, that's not happening. No, thank you. Again, it's not a judgment. It just is an important pattern to understand. Then we have our folks that are doing the flight response. What does this look like? So this might look like you avoid, you're withdrawing, you're not even responding. And sometimes I do coach moms to not respond. You do not need to respond all the time. This is presuming it is something you should respond to. And so you just really don't, you just like kind of ostrich it, bury your head in the sand, like I'm going to pretend like this isn't an issue. Then we have the freeze. Freeze and flight can look very similar in regards to communication. So if we're not talking about actually physically leaving the room with your ex, which would be flight, and freeze, which would just be like where you kind of just tense up and don't say anything at all. It's a little bit different with communication because flight and freeze can look really similar. Freeze and flight, the way you're going to differentiate them is really more of what it feels like internally for you. When you freeze, you go blank. Your mind kind of just goes blank. You can't really think. It feels like you can't think, I should say. It's really hard to make a decision. You may kind of stall, even if you know the right decision or the right response. And so again, it's an internal experience that feels different. The flee response is, I would do anything to just not ever have to respond to that. Where the freeze response is, I should do something. I need to do something. And then not being able to kind of formulate the words, if that makes sense. The fawn response, and the reason I bring this one up is because it's really interesting in high conflict co-parenting, because what ends up happening is one person really becomes kind of a doormat, for lack of better words, overly compliant, overly accommodating, maybe really trying to over-explain or trying to really smooth things over, really, really wanting to make sure that this person isn't mad at you. You may have different topics, may bring out different responses in you. And I encourage you in your own therapeutic settings or in your journal, kind of where you're working things out, to really explore why that is, because there probably is a reason. However, I just want you to kind of understand the basics of this. I really think about what your style is across different areas that might come up. What is really important for you to know, and what I want you to take away from this, is that you really can't always control your first reaction. It's going to happen. It's probably already happening. I'm sure it's happened for years. And your feelings are important and they're good information for you. And so trying to control how you react or that first initial reaction is going to be really difficult. Right? If you are someone that just, you know, that you kind of go into a fawn response, it's not very helpful for you to spend a lot of time trying to undo that. But what is helpful is for you to learn to acknowledge it and recognize that. Like, oh, I almost always respond this way. And then learning how to work with that response style before you send that message back, before you get overly like, no, it's fine. If we're talking about the fawn response, you can see like, oh, I'm doing it again. And then here are the tools that I have to work with that before I respond. Your first step is to name what it is that's happening. Again, we talk all the time about how this is a parallel to raising kids. When we're teaching them about their emotions, when we're teaching them about their responses, our first trick, it's not even a trick. The first thing you always do is you name what you're seeing. You look upset. I'm noticing that I really want to fight back right now. That would be an example of my own naming of a response. And then I want you to think about the tools. And if you don't have these tools, there are so many ways that you can get them. There's also this really wonderful resource within the Kids First community. We have the communication boot camp. The whole first day of that, it's spread out over 3 days. And the whole first day, we talk really in depth about fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And then I give you the tools on how to respond in those situations. So there's a lot of ways that you can work with it once you understand what's happening for you. So it's not about being perfect every time. It's about noticing patterns and working within those patterns, and then developing your set of tools for how you can respond. I would also encourage you, and it's always helpful to do this just in general with parenting, but if you're not sure what your style is, to kind of reach out and ask some close friends. What do you notice happens for me when I get a message from so-and-so? What do you think is my response? I just heard this podcast and I'm curious what you think as someone who loves me and knows me. It's not about being perfect. It's not about getting it right every time. The first step is starting to understand it so that you can then work on being less reactive to it. If you're thinking, all right, I can kind of get behind this. I want to understand my style. I now know that I respond in this way, but what do I do instead? That is exactly what we cover inside of the High Conflict Communication Bootcamp, which, by the way, is only $19 and is well worth your time. We go way beyond just naming these 4 experiences, and I teach you how to recognize the patterns in real time and give you the tools to work with it. The boot camp is 3 short, very powerful lessons designed for moms just like you, just like everything we do in the Kids First community, how you can communicate. As always, you can find that link in the show notes, and I can't wait to see you inside. Come find me on social media. We're across all platforms. As always, leave a review if you got something exciting out of this podcast.